Hello and welcome to episode 259 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. On the show today, I'll be flying solo to continue my conversation about the Disney Renaissance. For well over a year, I have been dedicating an episode almost every month to talk about the tenure of former Disney chairman and CEO Michael Eisner. On the episode that aired on December 18th, I started talking about the Disney Renaissance by covering The Little Mermaid, The Rescuers Down Under, and Beauty and the Beast. Those three films set the table for the two highest-grossing animated Disney movies of the 1990s. Before we get started, I'm making my weekly call for everyone to make sure you're subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. We consistently have more listeners to the podcast than we have subscribers. Of course, we appreciate every listen, but if you like our content, we would love for you to take 30 seconds and click that subscribe button. It is 100% free. While you're there, watch and share videos and vlogs, comment with something positive on a few videos, and make sure to click that like button all over the place. Now, let's resume our talk about the Disney Renaissance. When Michael Eisner took the top job at Disney, he brought his singles and doubles philosophy from Paramount Pictures. Simply put, Eisner believed in taking great scripts for movies that wouldn't cost a lot of money and turning them into films that would generate a significant return at the box office. This was a low-risk, high-reward strategy. Maybe the movie would overperform and shareholders would be ecstatic, but all they really had to do was come out on the black side of the ledger to be considered successful. He also wanted to produce more adult content under the Touchstone Pictures moniker. Eisner knew that the Disney brand was focused on kids, so his desire to diversify the offerings being produced by the company required an outlet like Touchstone. In the early 1980s, Robin Williams was in a stagnant point in his career. Of course, after appearing as the alien character Mork in what was supposed to be a one-off cameo on the hit sitcom Happy Days, Williams turned the attention he received from his guest spot into a second appearance on the show and eventually into a successful sitcom of its own in Mork and Mindy, which lasted from 1978 to 1982. He was still one of the most popular stand-up comedians in the world, appearing regularly on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson and Late Night with David Letterman. In 1986, Williams even co-hosted the Academy Awards. Even with his popularity as a comic, he wasn't finding any success on the big screen. Movies like Popeye, The World According to Garp, and The Survivors didn't result in the film career he wanted. Things finally changed for Williams when he was cast in one of Michael Eisner's singles and doubles movies. Adrian Cronauer was trying for years to pitch his script about an AFRS disc jockey in Vietnam. Originally, he wanted to turn the script into a television sitcom, but networks weren't interested, claiming that war wasn't good comedy material. At the time Cronauer was pitching the television show, MASH was still on top as one of the most popular sitcoms of all time. It is likely that executives thought the two concepts were too similar. By the mid-'80s, a few years after MASH was off the air, it was the perfect time to revive the idea as a feature film. It was a good script, could be produced on a small budget, and Williams actually came at a relative discount due to a lack of success from his recent movie endeavors. Good Morning Vietnam only cost Touchstone Pictures $13 million to make, and Williams was reportedly paid less than $2 million of that. Robin Williams got the role of Adrian Cronauer, but the writer of the same name admits that Williams took the script in directions he had never imagined. Cronauer said, quote, "I'm very happy with it. Of course, it was never intended to be an accurate point-by-point biography. It was intended as a piece of entertainment, and he was playing a character named Adrian Cronauer who shared a lot of my experiences, but actually, he was playing Robin Williams." He went on to add, quote, Anybody who's ever been in the military will tell you that if I did half of the things in that movie, I'd still be in Leavenworth right now. A lot of Hollywood imagination went into that movie. I was a disc jockey in Vietnam, and I did teach English in my spare time. I was not thrown out of Vietnam. I stayed for my full 1-year tour, and I was honorably discharged. The role was ideal for Williams, who was able to improvise large portions of the disc jockey scenes. He was able to almost be a stand-up comedian while adding in some more dramatic moments. Good Morning Vietnam was also a huge financial and critical success. It made almost 10 times its budget back at the box office, earning $123.9 million. Robin Williams specifically earned a nomination for Best Actor at the Oscars. He won Funniest Actor in a Motion Picture Leading Role at the American Comedy Awards, Best Actor in a Motion Picture Musical or Comedy at the Golden Globes, and a Grammy for Best Comedy Recording. The Good Morning Vietnam soundtrack was a combination of 1960s pop and Motown hits mixed with clips from the movie of Williams playing Adrian Cronauer. Good Morning Vietnam created a relationship between the Walt Disney Company and Robin Williams, showed Williams that he could find huge success mixing comedy and drama, and launched him into the most successful run of films in his career. Just 2 years after Good Morning Vietnam, he starred in the massively successful 1989 film Dead Poets Society. In 1990, he followed that with the comedy Cadillac Man and the drama Awakenings. Williams was now an A-list Hollywood name, and not just for his comedy. He was being nominated for major awards. It was becoming clear that he wasn't just Mork from Ork. He was a box office heavyweight. As we discussed last month, Walt Disney Animation was back to heavyweight status itself following the major successes of The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. Lyricist Howard Ashman and his working partner Alan Menken were finally given the green light by Disney to work on Ashman's passion project. Since 1988, he had been pitching his adaptation of a story from Arabian Nights. Ashman was on his deathbed as he continued to deal with complications from AIDS, but he got to work on Aladdin even if he wouldn't live to see its release in theaters. Directors Ron Clements and John Musker both worked on The Little Mermaid, and Musker also worked on Beauty and the Beast while Clements decided to take a break. The two agreed to get back together to work on the screenplay for the film. After an initial script was rejected by studio chief Jeffrey Katzenberg, the duo made some changes to Ashman's original ideas. They got rid of Aladdin's mother, changed the plot point that Jasmine had to be married by the age of 16 to a vague threat that she needed to be married by her next birthday, and they added the stipulation that the groom needed to be a prince. Screenwriters Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio also contributed reworkings to the story. They wanted to make Aladdin, quote, a little rougher, like young Harrison Ford. They also added the parrot Iago. Real-world events led to even more changes. Even though the screenplay was based a lot on The Thief of Baghdad, writers created the fictional city of Agrabah in the aftermath of the Gulf War. Actually, the war even prevented them from traveling to Iraq for research. Disney was left to get most of its research from a Saudi Arabian expo at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Katzenberg wanted the role of the genie to be voiced by John Candy, Steve Martin, or Eddie Murphy. Musker and Clements, however, based the character on Robin Williams. Supervising animator Eric Goldberg took audio of one of Williams's more high-energy stand-up routines and created rough sketches of the genie performing that material as a stand-up comic. This showed both Williams and Katzenberg that there was only one person who could voice the character. Initially, Robin Williams was thrilled to be working with Disney. He knew that appearing as the voice in an animated Disney movie would be something that he could share with his children. Williams also appreciated the opportunity Disney gave him to star in Good Morning Vietnam. Instead of asking for his standard price of $8 million, he agreed to voice the genie for scale of $75,000. In exchange for the discount, Williams asked for a few concessions. He didn't want to be the main focus of the advertising, and he didn't want to be used to peddle toys. This would end up being a major point of contention between Williams and Disney. For the title character, Scott Wenger won the role of Aladdin. His audition was very punk rock and DIY. Wenger sent in a homemade audition tape in which his mother substituted for Robin Williams as the genie. Originally, the animation for Aladdin was going to be based on Michael J. Fox, but the decision was made to make him look a little more mature, and they went with an image based on Tom Cruise. While Aladdin was the title character, Princess Jasmine was just as important to the storyline as the thief who annoyed Agrabah merchants. Despite having less than 2 years of acting experience in movies and television, and having to adjust her voice for filmmakers who were looking for a register a little deeper, Linda Larkin earned the role. It took 9 months of auditioning before Larkin secured the gig as Jasmine. Jonathan Freeman was cast as Jafar and had to do a lot of re-recording of his voice parts as Disney decided that his irritable personality should be toned down because it was believed that a calmer villain would be scarier and provide a more formidable sounding villain. In keeping with the tradition of Ursula in The Little Mermaid and Gaston in Beauty and the Beast, Jafar was another gay-coded Disney Renaissance antagonist. Robin Williams wasn't the only legendary stand-up comedian to voice a character in Aladdin, with Gilbert Gottfried absolutely crushing his screen time as Iago, Jafar's talking parrot sidekick. When it came to singing voices for the two main characters, Brad Kane took over as Aladdin, and Lea Salonga served as Jasmine. The film was an immediate success, due in part to Disney breaking its deal with Robin Williams, if not in the letter of the law, definitely in the spirit of the agreement to not use Genie as a primary piece of the marketing. Aladdin's trailer was added to the VHS releases of both 101 Dalmatians and Beauty and the Beast, that both were released for home sales earlier in 1992. Beauty and the Beast on video was released just the month before Aladdin hit theaters. On November 11th, the film showed at theaters in Los Angeles and New York before an expanded release on November 25th. Aladdin absolutely crushed at the box office overall. On a $28 million budget, it pulled in over $500 million. At the Oscars and the Golden Globes, Alan Menken won for Best Original Score, and Menken and Tim Rice took home the statue for Best Original Song for A Whole New World. The film and the soundtrack won plenty of other awards. A pop version of A Whole New World, sung by Peabo Bryson and Regina Belle, was a legitimate hit, peaking at number 18 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100, number 6 on the U.S. Adult Contemporary charts, and number 1 on the Canadian AC charts. Arguably, Aladdin went on to be the most influential film of the Disney Renaissance throughout the industry. Robin Williams in particular made voice actors in animated movies a major draw. This was almost exactly the opposite of what Williams wanted. A direct line can be drawn from Williams as the genie, to Mike Myers and Eddie Murphy in Shrek, to movies like Madagascar, Sing, Trolls, and even the Emoji Movie. It is relatively easy money for the stars. The marketing value of attaching a star's name to an animated movie is well worth the price to the studios. Star power also allows some lazier inside jokes for writers of these second-tier animated films. Sometimes the joke can just be that the particular actor is saying it as an inside joke for adults watching with their kids. By this point, the Disney Renaissance had cemented itself on a reliable formula. The Little Mermaid was an animated film based on an existing story written in the style of a Broadway musical, with memorable songs, a gay-coded villain, a new Disney princess, and a November release date. The Rescuers Down Under, which only fits into the Disney Renaissance as a scheduling technicality, was more of the old formula, but it did have a November release in 1990. In 1991, Beauty and the Beast was an animated film based on an existing story, written in the style of a Broadway musical with memorable songs, a gay-coded villain, a new Disney princess, and a November release date. The next year, Aladdin was an animated film based on an existing story written in the style of a Broadway musical with memorable songs, a gay-coded villain, a new Disney princess, and a November release date. One thing was gonna have to change moving forward for Renaissance projects. Howard Ashman died of complications of AIDS while working on his passion project of Aladdin. The lyricist who literally perfected the music and, in some cases, the overall stories of the three early Renaissance successes was not going to be able to take part in the next animated film. People will say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it when it comes to successful movies. With Ashman already an impossibility for the follow-up to Aladdin, Disney made some other changes with its next animated feature. Instead of a November of 1993 release date, Disney didn't follow up Aladdin until the summer of 1994. The company was planning on another animated film based on an existing story written in the style of a Broadway musical with memorable songs, a gay-coded villain, a new Disney princess, and a November release date for 1995. As a matter of fact, so many members of Disney Animation believed that 1995's Pocahontas was going to be the big success that they declined to work on the 1994 animated movie. Why not? Pocahontas was gonna follow the formula that had been so successful. It's understandable why some animators questioned the potential success of The Lion King. After breaking the bank with animated movies with human main characters, or mermaids turned into human main characters, The Lion King was going to return to the 1980s style of animal characters taking the lead. The movie wasn't going to have any human characters. It would, however, go on to become the most successful film of the Renaissance, at least financially, making close to $1 billion at the box office on a $45 million budget. If there was one thing that was needed for the promotion of The Lion King, it was going to be great music. The film would also need a radio hit that would draw people into the theaters. Tim Rice had just won awards and secured a hit with A Whole New World in Aladdin, and he was in pretty good negotiating position going into The Lion King. Alan Menken was unavailable as part of the group that was working on Pocahontas. Rice wanted to pick his own composing partner. Obviously, when he suggested Elton John, that proposal was immediately accepted. The voice casting for The Lion King grabbed a lot of big names as well. James Earl Jones, who provided the iconic voice of Darth Vader in Star Wars, gave the beautiful monologue in Field of Dreams, and was the voice proclaiming, "This is CNN," was tapped to play Mufasa because directors believed his thunderous vocal delivery was reminiscent of a lion's roar. Jones himself felt that the character of Mufasa was tamed down to be that of a, quote, dopey dad after years of production. Nathan Lane and Ernie Sabella were both performing together in a Broadway production of Guys and Dolls when they tried out for roles in the film. They ended up locking in for the roles of Simone and Pumbaa, the buddy duo of a meerkat and warthog. Sabella played Simone the meerkat, while Lane was tapped as Pumbaa the warthog. Rowan Atkinson was famous for his role as Mr. Bean, but he was initially resistant to lending his voice to the project. He felt that he was more of a physical actor, but he was convinced to take the role of Zazu by Mr. Bean writer Robin Driscoll. Comedian Whoopi Goldberg, a huge Disney fan herself, was tapped to voice one of the hyenas, while Matthew Broderick was hired to play adult Simba, and popular child actor Jonathan Taylor Thomas was added for the young voice of Simba. Like all of the other major successes of the Disney Renaissance, getting the villain right was incredibly important. A lot of huge actors were considered for the role of Scar. Tim Curry, Alan Rickman, Patrick Stewart, and Ian McKellen were some of the heavy hitters who were discussed. Personally, I would have loved to have seen Alan Rickman's portrayal come to life. Still, no matter how great those other actors are or were, Jeremy Irons won the role and was absolutely incredible. Animators even watched Irons' performances in Reversal of Fortune and Damage to make Scar's movements, traits, and facial tics resemble those of Irons. This is where I'm going to get a little controversial. Much has been made of The Lion King being a retelling of Hamlet, but I think there are some major issues with the story of this animated film. Early in the movie, Mufasa tells his young son Simba about the social structure of the Pride Lands. In that hierarchy, the lions are born to rule the other animals. Even when talking about how the lions eat other animals, Mufasa states that when the lions die, their bodies fertilize the grass that is then eaten by those other animals. I think we can all agree that's not really a fair trade. The hyenas are forced into the dark areas of the region to fend for themselves. The story structure promotes birthright nobility and even turns Scar into a villain for working with the discarded hyenas to gain power. When Scar is in power, the story tells us that it was justified to kick out these undesirable animals because they would overconsume and ruin the beauty of the system that was already in place. Not to be too dramatic about an animated film for children, but this is the way every immigrant group in history has been portrayed in an effort to protect birthright hierarchies and the status quo. I think they knew this was an issue because there are scenes where they go out of their way to add fascist imagery during Scar's reign. I just feel like there should have been more of an effort to have Simba grow to realize that all of the animals should share in the leadership of the Pride Lands. Just looking at the news over the last 2 weeks, you can see the danger in basing ideologies on theories around birthright hierarchies. When The Lion King opened for a limited release on June 15th of 1994, it was only in 2 theaters, featuring live shows with tickets costing as much as $30, a hefty amount back in 1994. It showed at just the El Capitan Theater in Los Angeles and at Radio City Music Hall in New York. On June 24th, it was released in the rest of the U.S. and in some foreign markets. The movie made almost $980 million worldwide on a $45 million budget. A film coming that close to $1 billion performance at that time was massive. It nearly doubled the box office for Aladdin, which would go on to be the second most lucrative film of the Disney Renaissance. Of course, the music was a huge part of the movie's appeal. Elton John's Can You Feel the Love Tonight and Circle of Life were both singles off of the soundtrack. Can You Feel the Love Tonight peaked at number 1 in Canada, Europe's adult contemporary charts, France, Panama, and on the U.S. adult contemporary charts. It peaked at number 4 overall on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. It also won Best Original Song at the Oscars and Golden Globes and Best Male Pop Vocal Performance at the Grammys. Circle of Life peaked at number 2 on the U.S. Adult Contemporary charts, and the song hit number 18 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. The soundtrack and the Hans Zimmer score also picked up multiple awards. The movie itself received a number of honors, led by Best Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy at the Golden Globe Awards. Disney went big with the marketing campaign. The company worked with Burger King, Mattel, Kodak, Nestle, and even Payless Shoes for merchandise. Almost 200 licensed products were made available to the public. Disney earned roughly $1 billion on products based on the film in 1994, and roughly $214 million came from Lion King toys during the holiday shopping season of that year. After tapping the financial success of The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin for straight-to-video sequels, Michael Eisner wasn't going to let his biggest hit go by without the same type of exploitation. First, a spin-off television series called The Lion King's Timon and Pumbaa, The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, and The Lion King 1.5 were released direct-to-video in 1998 and 2004. There was also a television series called The Lion Guard and The Lion Guard Return of the Roar, which aired on the Disney Channel and later on Disney Junior. The company had no way of knowing it, but the Disney Renaissance had hit its financial, critical, and cultural peak with The Lion King. Michael Eisner and many of the people working in Disney animation were actually caught off guard by The Lion King's success. It was widely believed that the animated film they had planned for release in June of 1995 was going to exceed The Lion King and every other Disney princess movie, with the possible exception of Snow White. What ended up happening was the exact opposite. The follow-up film not only earned about 1/3 of what The Lion King earned at the box office, but it also created controversies that the higher-ups at Disney just did not anticipate. Those controversies have caused the intellectual property to be limited in visibility in the parks and have caused the princess who headlined the film to be relegated to one of the least representative of the princesses in merchandise. While the next 5 Renaissance films couldn't be considered bombs at the box office, The Lion King serves as the line of demarcation separating the most accomplished and culturally relevant run of Disney animation in the 1990s with the films that couldn't quite live up to that reputation. On February 19th, I will wrap up this 3-part series of podcast episodes about the Disney Renaissance. We will talk about the final 5 films of the era. We will discuss the controversies, the mistakes, the high points, and the aftermath of this period in Disney animation. As I mentioned, it is not all low points. In that episode, we'll discuss my favorite Disney animated movie, one that stars one of my favorite Disney princesses. We'll also talk about what might be, with the exception of Elton John's work on The Lion King, the most well-received soundtrack for any Renaissance movie. A soundtrack that also featured a legendary artist who found success in the 70s, produced a string of gigantic hits in the 80s, and finally earned critical acclaim with songs for a Disney movie in the 1990s. There will be celebrities like Mel Gibson, Eddie Murphy, and Danny DeVito. As for next week on the show, I'm so excited to be welcoming Stacy from Das Defenders. In the past, we have discussed the changes that have been made at Walt Disney World and Disneyland in regards to disability access. These new policies have been a disaster for many disabled people in the Disney community. They have also led to some absolutely shameful behavior online from grown men who throw a hissy fit because an 8-year-old girl with spina bifida gets to wait for Dumbo on a bench instead of in a queue. The Das Defenders are trying to lobby Disney to either return to the previous accommodations or to come up with a new policy that will help all guests enjoy the theme parks. Disney has spent decades trying to promote inclusivity. It is time for the company, and Bob Iger specifically, to address a large part of the fan base that has been alienated by these changes. Here's a little bit of what you will hear from Stacy in that conversation.
So one of the biggest things with DAS, and GAC as well, is that if you needed to take space, if you had an issue that had to be resolved, you did not have to rush. You didn't have to worry about, okay, multipass, right? Or Genie Plus back then. You didn't have to worry that you only had an hour time frame or an hour and 15 minutes if you count the, whatever. You didn't have just that time frame. So if you had to suction, for instance, if you had, lung issues, or if you had G-tube feedings, or if you had, if you were autistic and you needed to be in a quiet space before you would go to that ride, you had that. You had that opportunity to take the time you needed, and you didn't have to rush because those DAS reservations sit there. You can't make another ride reservation, but it'll wait for you. And it's okay. That is great. That is amazing. If you have a child that has to go back to a hotel room, for a medical need, that's great because you can go back and do that. It was predictability. For people with autism, ADHD, OCD, whatever it may be, you had a predictability. You knew your schedule. With DAS, you could say, I'm going to this ride first. It doesn't matter how long I have to wait, but I'm going to go to this ride first. I'm going to go to this ride for next. I'm going to go to this one. The other thing was the fact that it's private. Nobody has to know. I'm not going up to a cast member and having to plead and let them know about my disability over and over again. So we have members, like you said, who, and me as well, but like who use this as a reward, whether they're going through cancer treatment, whether they're going through therapy, whether they're going through any kind of treatment. This is their reward. This is their place where they get to forget. With DAS, you get to forget for a little bit because chronic illness and disabilities are hard. They can be incredibly painful. And having one place where you can forget that for even a couple hours and you can be your own individual, independent person in some cases that maybe you can't get anywhere else is amazing. It gives you such hope. It gives you somewhere where you can look forward to when things are so hard. So with DAS, being able where you're mixed in. Yes, you could say, okay, the blue light versus the green light. Okay, whatever. But most guests don't know the difference. So when I go and I scan my pass or my magic band, nobody knows that why I'm in that line. They think I paid just like everybody else. They think that I'm like every other guest, and feeling like everybody else once in a while is amazing. It can give you so much of a break from feeling like everything is such a fight. And that is amazing. And feeling, like you said, included, going up there and being, when you scan your pass or band and being said, the cast member just saying, hi, okay, enter the line, not, what is your need? What is your barrier? Why can't you wait in line? And not having to say that in front of, 10, 15 other guests who are also waiting by that umbrella or have an issue or just, sitting next to wherever that ride is where that can hear you. You get to forget for a little bit. You just get to forget that, whatever the barrier is, you're in the magical place. We all want to be at Disney or Universal or Knott's or Six Flags. And we want that magic. We want that feeling of being wrapped around by this make-believe place, and we want to be with our friends and family, and we want to feel like we're all included and like we're together. Some of these alternatives split families and split groups, and that's hard. And that takes away some of the magic. So having the DAS makes it where you're together and you're in your own little bubble and you're, like I said, everything is so much easier, which when life is so hard, it's great to have that one place where you can do that.
You can hear that entire discussion next Thursday on Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Until then, have a great week.